Just wait a moment so we can all come on down. So hello, thank you so much for joining us today. I can say hello and bonjour and white and geistig quiet to everyone joining us this evening. My name's Jade. I'm a part of the team at the Outdoor Learning Store. We're a North American-wide charitable social enterprise that's offering outdoor learning equipment, tools, resources for educators and learners, and everything we do goes back into supporting other outdoor educational non-profits. We also work closely with Take Me Outside. They're our partner in delivering this workshop. So within Turtle Island or North America, we know that land-based learning must honour the traditional knowledge of the indigenous populations who've known and stewarded this land for millennia and since time immemorial. Particularly in the context of this workshop, Indigenous peoples have been active in building climate resilience and managing environments before it was widely accepted in other communities. So we ask now, if you do have this knowledge, if you can please share in the chat what Indigenous territory you're joining us from today. And if you're living on traditional and unceded territory and you don't know whose land it is, you can visit native-lands.ca. It actually covers Indigenous populations from across the globe. Land acknowledgements are just the starting point for relationship building with local Indigenous, First Nations or Native groups. For example, and it's normally much longer than this, but I live in a place that's colonially known as Revelstoke, British Columbia. But before that, it has been home to 4 First Nations. It is the traditional territories of the Snipes people, the bull trout people, but it's also been utilised, hunted, fished, stewarded and cared for by the Secwepemc, the Okanagan Silks and the Ktunaxa First Nations. Where I live is at the Big Eddy. It's a big corner turn with this big swirling water source on the Columbia River, and the Sinixt in Celsheen name for that is Skihikan, and it means where the ridgelines meet the water and nestled between the Selkirks and the Monashi Mountains, of which the traditional names have either been lost or taken. It's a really special place here at the confluence of lots of rivers. So I would like to say Lim Limt and Cooksjam and Hisukini, thank you to the Indigenous people who've cared for this land. Over to you, Steph.
Thanks. Yeah, it's lovely to see new and familiar faces coming into the room here, for those with their camera on. So I'm Steph. I'm the program coordinator for Take Me Outside. And on behalf of our organization and our 50 plus now outdoor learning partners, it's really great to be here this evening, really excited to be here. I'm calling in from Vancouver Island, British Columbia on the West Coast, which is Coast Salish territory. It's a very wide area of Coast Salish territory. Where I'm at specifically is where the Kawatsan people, sometimes known as the Cowichan tribes, have been since time immemorial. The Hulkaminam speaking people have moved through this land for a long time. And the mountain just above my house, I've been learning, its colonial name is Mount Prevost, but a long time before that, it's been known as Sukwis. And Haichka for being here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. So welcome to this place of partnership, of growth, of caring, of sharing. These workshops are for you and us to learn together. So thank you for taking the time to support us and your own learning practice. We're so grateful for all of our creators and presenters and all of the people who benefit from you coming to this and then sharing what you've gained here tonight. This is a place to have fun, share in the chat, share resources, connect. We're seeing that happen a lot, but this is a really safe space for you to dive in. We know this work matters for the physical, social, emotional, and academic well-being of young people. So yay for us for investing our time and being here. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. For those of you just joining us, welcome, Zoom 101. So questions and connections go in the chat, but any questions you have, pop them in there. Steph or Duncan, who are working behind the scenes, are going to collate those and put them in a doc, and I will pose them to Ian and Sam later on at the end of their presentation. Please stay muted. You can keep your video on. It's nice to present to faces, or you can tuck it away. That's no problem. Closed captions, if you hit the more button at the bottom of your screen with 3 dots, you'll be able to see enable closed captions. So if you are hard of hearing and would like to have subtitles, you can get them in there. We're going to have a presentation, we're going to have Q&A, and then prizes right at the end. So please stay to the end. We really appreciate it. You'll be able to access a recording of this, discount code, and your certificate of attendance via a link that's going to be emailed to you shortly after the workshop. So please check your spam folder if you don't have it by lunchtime tomorrow. Ooh, we're going to start with a couple of polls to get a bit of an idea of what's going on. And I'm going to launch it there. I'm hoping everyone can see that. So the first question is, where are you joining us from? I know we spoke about our land acknowledgement. Let's get an idea of a region in this moment. And sorry, it's not as all-encompassing. Oh, I'm going to just give it 5 more seconds. We have 250 odd people here. So I'm going to give you a bit of time, but otherwise we might. And then in the end, I'm going to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm ending the poll. I'll share the results with you. This is amazing. We have representation from across Turtle Island down to Mexico and somewhere else on this planet. I know I can't give you an answer specific, but if you type in the chat where you're joining from, we'd love to see that. Oh, Ireland, lovely, across the Atlantic. Welcome, welcome. Okay, I'll stop sharing that one. I just have one more question for you, and it's a bit of a who are you? And please scroll down. There are other options if you don't see your one there, and maybe you are multiple, and it's hard because I can't allow you to be multiple things. So in this, what hat are you wearing today? And it's really interesting to see who's joining us. Okay, 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and look, again, this makes me so happy, the diversity of people joining us, formal educators, informal, some admin and support people, and some people who aren't even traditional educators, but we think that word covers anyone who's just passionate and shares with people. Hello, librarian. Books are my happy place. Thank you for joining us. Okie dokie. So I'm just going to share a really quick slideshow because I just have to say thank you to a couple of people and welcome you formally so that I can introduce our fantastic guests as well. And so here we are. Welcome to the second, because Brady's Bluegrass is rearranged here, but it's 31st of January, we're talking climate change and sustainability education resources. These are our international partners. These are our US partners. And our Canadian partners. So we've built this network of over 60 partners, of people that have expertise. You can go to our website and they will share their resources and anything that they have connected to outdoor learning there with you. And we're here to talk about amazing climate and sustainability resources. I'm going to let the experts do their thing, but this is just a little very quick overview of a couple of the things that they might be talking about and that we have in the store available. But here's where the fun happens. This is climate change and sustainability education resources. And I'm going to introduce you step by step. Just 1 second. So kicking us off tonight is Ian. Ian is the editor of Green Teacher. This is a world-renowned organisation that's published hundreds of practical examples, activities and lesson plans from teachers who are making a difference in their classrooms and communities. Also just worked as a voice actor, as an interpreter, teacher, has all the things, and also co-hosts our Earthy Chats podcast with yours truly. So welcome, Ian, this evening. And then our second... Oh, sorry. And our second guest, I'm always doing that in the podcast as well, classically overcutting people. And our second guest tonight who will be speaking after Ian is Sam Levac-Levey. Sam is the developer of the Solutions of Solutions. It's a board game to inform, inspire, hope and action for climate. Solutions was designed with educators in mind, and each solution card played requires students to actively engage with the solution, think critically and discuss it with their peers. So Sam is going to share with us the amazing work that he's been doing there. And with that, I will bow out and very happily pass it over to you, Ian.
Thank you so much, Jade. So I will share my screen because I do still really like PowerPoint. I know there is such thing as death by PowerPoint, but it is kind of awesome sometimes too. So I will roll with the PowerPoint, but I will promise not to bore you to death. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay? We're all good to go?
Looks
Excellent.
great.
So I am joining you from the Eastern time zone. I see we have people from all over Australia, Ireland, Hawaii, many, many time zones represented. So I'm in Eastern time in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. This is Williams Treaty territory. The closest major community is Toronto, which is fairly close within just about a little over an hour away from where I am based. And I am, in addition to my work with Green Teacher, which involves all of environmental education, of which climate change and sustainability education is just one part, I just individually am heavily engaged in learning about the fascinating topic of climate change and particularly climate solutions. This is a very small sampling of my climate change bookshelf. This picture was actually taken a couple years ago, and the shelf and the pile, I should say, is much, 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 much taller. And some of you may well have read a lot of these books, all of which are wonderful resources. And of course, there are many wonderful resources not listed here. And I was reflecting the other day about this growing stack of books and what I'm going to do with this growing stack of books. And I thought, wouldn't this make an amazing time capsule? We talk so much about these important future dates, 2030, 2035, 2040, 2050. Probably the most prominent that we hear about with regards to climate change and decarbonization is 2050, with this concept of net zero by 2050. And I guess I'm going to age myself here, but I don't do a lot of math, but I did a little bit of math and figured out that I will be retirement age 65 in the year 2050. And I thought, well, that's quite fitting, where I can really, as I'm theoretically entering retirement, I can sort of look back and say, did we figure this out? And that's an increasingly important question in my life, is what if we do figure this out? And currently, and starting on a good news note here, it looks like the worst case scenarios in terms of climate disruption are off the table now. And they were not off the table 10, 15 years ago. And most projections have us not projected for the 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius rise in temperatures. Now, the best case scenarios, the 1.5 and the 2 degrees Celsius that we hear so much about, we are not yet on track for those, but we still can. And increasingly, in both my work with Green Teacher and just my approach to life, is I'm thinking about this question of what if we get it right? And this is an empowering question. It's a brave and hopeful question, but it's not based on pie in the sky hope. It's based on very real hope. And that's really the underlying theme of what both Sam and myself are going to be touching on with our time together today, is reasons for that hope, reasons to feel empowered about this transition to a clean energy economy, which is already in progress and moving much quicker than many people even 10 years ago would have thought. So what if we get it right? And even more specifically, what does that world look like? This is something that we're doing in an upcoming issue of Green Teacher magazine, where we're focusing on the energy transition, and we're asking this question: what if we get it right, and what does this future look like? It's so important that we tell these stories, whether it's stories from the past, the present, or the future, about the world that we desire. We hear so much about the post-apocalyptic Mad Max future. Why don't we hear more about the future where we figured it out, and the future where we got it right? And what largely got me thinking about this question was this quotation from one of the most impactful books that I've read in recent times. It has a very long title, What We Think About When We Try Not to Think About Global Warming, by Per Espen Stoknes, a Norwegian author who focuses on climate communication, which is probably my biggest area of focus when it comes to climate change, because I'm not a climate scientist, I'm not a leading researcher, I'm not out there developing nuclear fusion, although all of that is very important. I'm a climate change communicator. So books like this really speak directly to me. And you can see the quote there, just really paraphrasing it. If we just rely on the numbers and the facts and focus on catastrophes, where is the room for the things that really move us emotionally? the things that are part of a really good story: humor, emotion, visualization, point of view, climax, surprise, plot, drama, whether it's a TV show or a movie or a story or a comic book. Those are the stories that we need to be telling. And fortunately, these can all be based on reality. So this quotation is really important. And that question of what if we get it right is very important and very much guides me in my work and just in my approach to taking each step forward into the future. Speaking of books, Green Teacher's 2 books, Teaching Kids and Teaching Teens About Climate Change, are excellent introductions to this very complex topic, and I can't take any credit for these books whatsoever. My predecessor, Tim Grant, deserves that credit. And his big contribution with these books was distilling the concept of climate change into 4 subcategories, sort of a 4-branch framework for looking at it. So breaking it down into global warming, climatic instability, consequences of global warming, and climatic flips. So these tipping points that we're hearing about from journalists like David Wallace Wells, for example. These books really act as toolkits for educators to broach this difficult and challenging, but also opportunity-filled topic of climate change. And again, giving credit to Green Teacher's publisher, Tim Grant, who was the main driving force behind these 2 books. In addition to the books, and this is something that's offered through the Outdoor Learning Store through the Routes to Resources package, is access to Green Teacher's digital magazine / resource portal. And this gives you an idea of what the user experience is in the portal interface. You can read back issues of the magazine, but you can also search for individual lessons, articles, and activities, either by topic or by age group. And one of the more recent articles about climate change education in our resource portal is this one here by researcher Seth Wines. And based on research that he did alongside Kim Nicholas in 2019, he came up with this little framework for understanding climate change and sort of simplifying this very complex process. So in short, the Earth is warming. It's bad. It's because of humans. Experts agree. But my favorite and perhaps the most important part, we can fix it. We can, and we already are. We can fix it. How do we know we can fix it? Well, there are many places you can look. There are so many books about climate solutions. It's overwhelming. And I file that under the category of very nice problems to have. Paul Hawken is responsible for a lot of this content on climate solutions. And I know Sam will touch on Paul's work as well. His most recent book came out in 2021, Regeneration. The title and subtitle speak for themselves. That was sort of the follow-up to his book Drawdown. And I don't want to steal Sam's thunder too much, but Sam will be talking quite a bit about Drawdown and what it's all about. In short, both of these books are heavy on climate and sustainability solutions, as is the book How to Be a Climate Optimist by Canadian climate journalist Chris Turner. And this book came out last May in 2022. So you don't have to look far to find some really encouraging news that's based on real things that are actually happening, real solutions. Now, this is not so easy. Yes, we do have to focus on solutions when we teach about climate change and sustainability, but we do have to navigate our way around several pitfalls, one of which is the concept of techno-optimism. Now, this might seem contradictory because many of the solutions, in fact, all of the solutions to a certain degree, are tech related, some of them very high tech, especially nuclear fusion, which I just mentioned. We just had the breakthrough about a month ago, which certainly bodes well down the road in a few decades, perhaps. But it is easy to sit back and just say, well, you know, if we continue with the status quo, we can just keep burning fossil fuels and we'll tech our way out of it with technologies like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which is an important technology and will play a critical role in our decarbonization efforts. But it is not an excuse to strictly stick with the status quo and energy system powered by fossil fuels. So I always like to mention these pitfalls to navigate around because, as with anything worthwhile in life, it's never quite so simple. This is another really useful resource on climate change. It came out in 2021 by Dr. Michael E. Mann from Penn State University. He's a very prominent voice in the climate science and climate communication communities. He's probably the climate scientist who's taken the most heat from the various vested interests. Yet he has emerged unscathed through, I shouldn't say unscathed, but he's emerged through that and given some really tremendous insights, particularly in this book from 2021. And really the central focus of the book is the fact that outright denialism has pretty well flown the coop. It's still out there, but the voices are louder than they are numerous. That's essentially been replaced by what Michael Mann describes as a series of other words that all happen to start with the letter D. Disinformation. We certainly live in an age of rampant disinformation at the moment. Deflection. We'll talk a bit more about this shortly. Delayism. So yes, we need to decarbonize, but later. That's a prominent one these days. And doomism, the idea that it's too late, let's just give up and, party until midnight kind of thing. None of those are particularly effective, and they all lead to another D word. Downplaying, we'll add on top of that, not specifically touched on in the book, but also another D word that is used by vested interests. And all of these 5 D words lead to this other D word, despair. And a lot of people are feeling this. A big study in 2021 came out, published in The Lancet, about eco-anxiety. Some people think that that's a misleading term. We should talk about it more in terms of complex climate emotions, because is it really irrational to be anxious about an alarming situation? Not irrational, but it is still possible to be hopeful and to feel empowered. And our job as educators is to take this despair, which is rooted in reality, and turn it into empowerment, which is also rooted very much in reality and these tremendous climate solutions that we'll be focusing on in our time together today. So I'm just going to walk you through a small sampling of activities from Green Teachers 2 climate change education books. We'll start with the teens book, Teaching Teens About Climate Change. And this really just hits so many targets that you want in terms of an engaging, relevant, action-oriented, solutions-focused activity. And you can very much adapt it to your own local setting. So it's called Teaching About Carbon Regulation, and it works through 3 different regulations scenarios, all of which are in use in different parts of the world today. So there's a command and control, just very much a top-down. We often talk about carrots and sticks. This is the system that is mostly based on sticks, hard regulations. This is what your emission output must be, hard, firm, no questions asked. It's certainly the most draconian of the measures, and in certain local situations, it might be necessary. This activity also looks at a carbon tax. So in Canada, we have a carbon tax. Carbon pricing is a big part of our regulatory toolbox at the moment. And where Sam is based in California, cap and trade has played a significant role in reducing emissions. So all of these regulation scenarios have their role. It's just about finding the right fit for the time and the place. And that's really what it's all about with any kind of solution to anything in life. So the way this works is the teacher can serve as a fictitious entity. You could call them, for example, the North American Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or something else more relevant to your local situation. Always bringing that local relevance is important. You'll then select 2 or more students to be your carbon brokers. They can be your sort of number cruncher folks to look at the different emissions regulation scenarios and the impact economically and in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And then the remainder of your group, your class, will be split into 6 fictitious but realistic utility companies with 2 to 5 students each. Each utilities company will receive this page that just gives the basic information about the company, what their energy usage is, the year that how long they've been in operation, their CO2 emissions in millions of tons per year. And then at the bottom half of the page, you can see how this organization, this utilities company, would react based on these different regulatory scenarios: command and control, cap and trade, carbon tax. Each utilities company, so each group of students, then gets to chart the numbers. They get to crunch the numbers based on each scenario. So what is the impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and cost under command and control, under a carbon tax, under a cap and trade regulatory system? And that way you can start to plan out what is the most effective solution, short-term, midterm, and long-term for this utilities company. And then I think what's most important about this activity, and I know this is a big part of the work that Sam has done with Solutions the Game, is taking that next step into real world, local relevant action. So maybe use this activity as a springboard for looking at the emissions output of a local utilities company in your jurisdiction, in your province or state. What would be the economic impact? What would be the impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions under different regulatory scenarios? Maybe set up a meeting with folks from that company. Maybe write letters to local representatives to talk about the benefits of different regulatory systems. Making it local, making it relevant, and bringing that action component into it are all really, really critical parts of empowerment. And I mentioned before, I'm not the greatest mathematician, but this is my best effort at an equation. So solution plus local plus action equals empowerment. And this is backed up by a growing body of research by folks like Ellen Field, Maria Van Vlies, and a huge number of climate change researchers all around the world. I could go on and on and on about all the great work that's being done in the climate education and communication field. But this really encapsulates a lot of what we're finding from this research. But again, there are still pitfalls to avoid. We talked about the techno-optimism as an excuse for the status quo. We also have to be wary to deflection of individuals. When we talk about taking climate action, whether it's at a local scale or a more national or international scale, we have to be clear that we can't completely reach our Paris targets, our net zero by 2050, by strictly focusing on individual actions like switching to LED lights. These are important, absolutely. They absolutely play a role. However, it again plays into the favor of those who are trying to uphold the status quo if we completely focus on small individual actions instead of high impact collective actions. And we need to bring this into our education as well. That brings us to one of those D words, deflection, deflecting to individuals. It's all your fault. Every time you jump in a car, it's your fault. Is there a tiny little bit of truth to that? Maybe, but it's a lot more complex than that. And you driving in your car to the grocery store or not driving in your car to the grocery store isn't ultimately going to move the needle enough to get to the targets that we know we must and can get to. So we need to focus on these high impact actions. And an educational activity in our Teaching Teens book that allows you to do this is about a car trip reduction plan for schools. And it starts with a survey of looking at the transportation habits of people in your school, using that hard data to come up with a plan that can maybe be a competition among classes, then it can maybe be scaled up to among schools in your district, then maybe among districts in your province or state. Those are the kinds of actions that take you beyond the realm of individual action that doesn't move the needle much to collective actions that can move the needle significantly. So those are just two examples of activities in our Teaching Teens book, but we also have our Teaching Kids book. So what about teaching climate change to kids? Well, this is a guiding principle that applies really to any environmental and sustainability education, is no tragedies before fourth grade. This is from David Sobel, who's well known for his publications on place-based education, such as this book, Place-Based Education, which I know is available in the Outdoor Learning Store. It's a very quick, easy read. And you can probably find it somewhere, anywhere there are environmental educators. And as I say, the Outdoor Learning Store has a copy, and it's a really, really good read. And yeah, David Sobel, no tragedies before fourth grade. Focus on the wonder of nature. Focus on positive associations. You can learn about climate science. You can learn about renewable energy, clean energy economies without getting into any of the heaviness that is associated with climate change and with climate disruption. One such activity, and this is just one of many really positive association-oriented activities in our Teaching Kids book. This is by Pam Miller from the Toronto District School Board. It's called Caught Up in the Carbon Cycle. It was a very complicated activity to put together, as Pam herself told me, but it really paid off. The way it works, in short, is you have preset action cards at each of 7 different stations, and I'll point out what those stations are. Each represents a different landing spot for a carbon molecule in the actual carbon cycle. So each learner takes on the role of a carbon molecule. You review some relevant vocabulary such as combustion, decomposition, diffusion, etc. You give each student a passport, which is a sheet to chart their journey through the carbon cycle. And then they travel to different stations, picking up cards at each station that tell them what has happened and where they go. And this is an example of what their charting card looks like. So you can see some of the different stations they get to. There's the animal station, there's the atmosphere station, combustion station, plants, rock cycle, soils, and water. 7 different stages in the carbon cycle. And you can do this outside. You can be running around. You can make it very local and place-based. Instead of just a generic model of the carbon cycle, for the plant station, you can say you're going to that tree on our schoolyard. For the soil station, you can say you're going to the dirt right beneath your feet. So you can really make it local and place-based, which just fits so well with so much impactful outdoor and environmental education. And again, that's just one activity. And in total, I've just covered 3 activities in our books, which again break down the concept of the climate science into global warming, climatic instability, consequences of global warming, and climatic flip. And then in terms of high impact approaches to climate change education, keep it local and place-based as much as you can, make it action-oriented, but not too much focus strictly on individual actions, focus on solutions, and of course, create those positive associations with learning to make it emotionally engaging. This is a perfect segue to Sam, who is going to be talking not just about climate solutions, but the game he created called Solutions. We talked about this on episode 15 of our Talking with Green Teachers podcast, which you can find on all of the regular podcast platforms. We got into some really interesting territory, including talking about woolly mammoths as related to climate change. So I will leave you with that intriguing notion as I unshare my screen and pass the virtual baton to Sam. So take it away, Sam.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for that absolutely lovely transition, Ian. And yeah, I just want to say I absolutely love your framing of what if we actually do fix climate change. And it's a super creative question. It reminds me of when we first started talking about collaborating. I read your Teaching Teens About Climate Change book and just kind of figure out, well, whoa, what am I getting myself into here? And it was just such a lovely and really creative collection of all these different activities. I think it just really impressed me overall. So yeah, I will share my screen with you guys. Let's see. Give me 1 second.
Oh, you're getting that all set up, Sam. Sam's got a lot of
Sure.
audio and video and fun things happening.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Ian. Yeah, if you haven't checked out the Talking with Green Teachers podcast, it is a wealth of information and fantastic things. And it looks like we are getting ready to go.
All right. So I'm super excited to present to you guys about how we can use games as a starting point to inspire real world climate action. And so, as Ian said, I'll be doing this through the guise of the Solutions game. And just to maybe start with a bit about myself. So my climate journey started in grade 4, actually, and it was a teacher who really got me started. And basically one morning after sitting down into class, my teacher had us all stare at the clock for a minute in pure silence. And we had no idea what was going on. We were all kind of making fun and looking at each other. And once the minute was up, our teacher looked at us and said, all right, well, in that last 60 seconds, X acres of rainforest were just cut down. And I remember just looking back up at that clock for the remaining, I think probably the next month, and just like visualizing all the trees being cut down, the animals running from their homes. And that's really what started my journey into environmentalism, if not climate at the time. So if we fast forward a little bit, so I studied mechanical engineering in university, and my goal was really always to start a string of companies in different areas that could have huge social impact. And so I set up internships and work experiences in all the industries that I may one day want to start a company in. And so that took me on a bunch of different journeys, from working on rockets at SpaceX to energy storage at Tesla, electric flying cars at William Aviation, and a bunch of other cool stuff. And so now there's really three main things that I'm working on. The first is I help run a climate community called Work on Climate, which started with 8 of us back in September 2020, and we're now over 17,000. And it's, as far as we can tell, the world's largest and most active technical climate community. And then I also recently launched Starshot Capital, which is an early stage venture capital fund that focuses on gigaton scale climate solutions. And then finally, there's the solution board game, which is what I'll be focusing on today. And so Ian mentioned Paul Hawken and the book Drawdown, and I hope a lot of you are familiar with the book. And if you're not, it was really one of the most influential books that kind of shaped my own climate journey. And basically they had 200 experts review all the climate solutions that they could come across before it was cool. And so they were really the first organization to take this comprehensive deep dive of all solutions as a collective. And I would just like flip through the book and think, well, how can I fit into this solution, or how can I fit into this one? And in September 2019, I flew out to their first ever conference in Penn State, and we had an amazing time. And at the end, we held an unconference, which was basically the attendees coming together, brainstorming, all right, well, how can we bring all these solutions out into the world? One of the attendees happened to be Hank Rogers, who's the entrepreneur behind the video game Tetris. And he, of course, ran a session on gamification. And one of his suggestions from his group was, all right, well, let's turn Drawdown into a card game. And I heard him say that, and I was just immediately like, no, this needs to be a board game, not a card game. And I just kind of started brainstorming the rules on the spot and talked to him, talked to the rest of the Drawdown team, and they were like, yeah, sure, you can go ahead and do this. So before talking anymore, I'll just give you a quick video that shows you a bit of what the game looks like in action. And please let me know if you cannot hear the sound. I think you should be able to.
Are we all good? This is big.
One by one? Yeah, it makes sense. From here, from the lowest to the lowest. Let's see.
Oh, what?
Oh, that's so wrong. Well, that is so wrong.
Oh!
Maybe we have it in backwards order. I wouldn't have thought that.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
This is like number two.
Yeah.
I think it's like the very simple, obvious ones are the highest.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And so, as you can see, the goal really is to get people just having fun and just intensely discussing these solutions while having a great time. And so really there's 3 purposes behind the game that's in the subtitle. So that's discover, prioritize, and take action. And I'll take you through the 3 of those. So the first one being discover. And when most people think about climate solutions, they think about things such as solar panels and electric cars. And those are super, super important solutions and they're in the game. But the fact is that there's so much more out there that most people just haven't heard of. And so there's 101 different solutions in the game. And so yeah, goal 1 is to just spread awareness and just get people thinking a bit about those. Goal number 2 is to prioritize, by which I mean getting people to really think critically and engage meaningfully with those solutions. And an example I love to give here is, I don't know if any of you guys are board game people, but there's a fantastic game called Terraforming Mars, which is one of the most popular games. And in that game, you're actually trying to cause climate change on Mars in order to make it habitable for humans. And they have these amazingly creative cards, and you can see some of them on screen. There's the Electro Catapult or Arctic Algae, and super fun cards. But when you actually get to playing the game, I was actually a bit disappointed because the magic of the cards has nothing to do whatsoever with the gameplay. And all that matters in that game is, all right, well, this card says +1 this, -8 this. And so I made a really important goal for solutions so that every time you play one of these magical climate solutions, you're going to need to actively engage with it and think critically about it. Some of the other design intentions behind the game were to make it as realistic as possible. So to give one example of that, I tried to match up luck in real life to luck in the game. And so, for example, if you look at climate feedback loops, we know that there are feedback loops out there. We know that the warmer the world gets, the more likely we are, but we don't necessarily know exactly when they're going to happen. And so the way I represent that in the game is the warmer the world gets, you have a dice roll, and the warmer the world gets, the more likely you are to get those feedback loops. The goal is also to get people while playing the game to feel some intensity, feel like they're under a bit of pressure, but also feel hopeful and empowered at the same time and feel like they're on a team trying to solve this great problem together. And so we tested the game with over 600 people, from kids, teens, adults, students, climate scientists, members of the general public, and Ian and Green Teacher were an incredible help with that process, and helping with the testing and getting the word out. And so you can see on the left, kind of, I'll call them markets that I feel like are validated really well, being educators and the general public. And then on the right, areas that I'd like to break into a bit more that I probably won't spend as much time on. But yeah, so for educators, we tested across the education spectrum. The age range for the game is 10 plus, although I have had some people use it for younger students, but generally 10 seems to be a good age. And the thing is that because it's a very discussion-based game, the difficulty level actually scales very well from elementary school to PhD students. And yeah, so partnered with Green Teacher and Climate Science as well to help develop a lesson plan for the game. And yeah, so I'll just give you a few really short video clips just to see what the game has looked like in different school settings. So here's high school.
Every day, but you're gonna have to build all those.
Well,
you're gonna have to turn.
are more important because you have a lot of people.
So Piper, if the train was electric,
that then aren't using a car.
But unfortunately, none of them people use electric trains.
Yeah, but
Well, maybe if we had electric trains, people would use them.
Would you? Is it not an train? The train doesn't always get to where you want. You get to the train station, sure, but what if?
So you can see these kids just getting really passionate about the solutions, which I love to see. Here's a middle school in Sweden, actually. So yeah, getting some of that excitement. And then here's an elementary school, I think in Florida.
Let's see how we did. Low flow fixtures are 70.
Probably the worst one in there.
Composting. That's my 57.
That's ours.
Last card.
See if Brady screws it up again.
32.
All right, and so then talking about the general public quickly, and I know our focus is education, but I think this is kind of important to talk about that. Well, one of the big challenges I've found in terms of marketing the game is how to make it not sound like you're going to be playing homework, if that makes sense. And I got this one great quote from a game designer who played the game from Switzerland. And he said, I never considered a board game about climate change as something that I would buy or enjoy playing, but man, was I wrong. Solutions was a blast to play, and we were caught off guard by so many of its solutions. And I do highly recommend to give it a try if the topic sounds only remotely interesting to you. And so really the goal here is to try and figure out how we can get even people who aren't forced to be playing in the education system, how can we get anyone to get excited about this topic? I'll skip over this. So the third purpose of the game is turning it into real world action. And here you can see the back of one of the solution cards in the game. Just to take you through it a little bit, you can see here there's the ranking of the solution, number one being the most impactful. Here there's the estimated gigatons of CO2e that the solution will reduce. There's a little graphic here that gives a bit of a sense of scale of the solution, a little blurb that gives more of an explanation about why it's ranked where it is. And then if you scan the QR code, you can go to a website like this. And so there you can click on the Learn More button and you can dive into some of the fundamental research behind that solution. And what I haven't yet built out, but I would love to, is this take action button. How do we get people really inspired, as Ian was saying, to take action beyond themselves? And really, this is going to mirror a lot of what you were saying, Ian, but to me, the point is that when most people think about climate action, what can I do about climate change? They think of two series of action. There's the tiny personal actions like flying less or eating less meat, having less kids, and those can be great, but they can also feel disempowering to a lot of people. And then on the other side, there's the giant corporate actions that only corporations or governments can take that feel just out of reach. And a lot of what I'm trying to show is that I think there's a sphere of action in between where a single individual or a group of individuals can have impact well beyond just themselves. And I'll give you a last quick video example of a school doing this with the reduced food waste solution. And just really thinking about how can we get this beyond just our own individual impact.
Meanwhile, at Rosarian Academy, 6th graders are carefully weighing the wasted food after the daily lunch break to see if they can reach a 30% reduction over the next 3 weeks.
The school was even so inspired by the students presenting to administration their idea and why they want to do it and why it's important that the leadership decided to bring back a garden that the school previously had and they got rid of in order to build something else. I'm a first-year teacher, I don't know. And so we got the garden, and the garden is going to be built, and we're going to have little composting pods in the garden. So the game inspired the students, who then inspired the administration to make a bigger impact right here at school. So just so thankful that we're able to have the solutions game. And it really is a great learning tool for my students, even as a confident climate communicator. This really helped me in my classroom, and it helped inspire the next generation to act on behalf of our planet, which is really important.
So that's something that I wasn't expecting at all, which was the students actually inspiring the teachers and the faculty. And so I'll leave you all with a quote from the World Economic Forum saying, if parents and educational systems leverage learning through play, we could all be more prepared for the future. So thank you very much. And thank you, Jade and Duncan and the Outdoor Learning team as well, and Ian. And the Outdoor Learning Store has the game on their website, so I encourage you to check it out. Happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you so much to both you, Ian and Sam, for those amazing resources. And yes, as someone who personally uses both of them, it's I just think it's so fun how much knowledge there is now to share about climate change in a way that's engaging. You know, kids are so invested in play, and there are so many activities in the book. There's a carbon cycle game where kids are running around and acting as molecules. It's just amazing to me, your ingenuity and your creativity. So thank you so much for all you're doing to bring that to this. Now, we have a couple of questions that have come in through the chat. So I'm going to pose them, and I'm maybe going to pose them to both of you. I'm going to start with Ian, and then we can see where we go. So Kim wrote, firstly, I appreciate the optimistic stance. Kim's concerns are around dominant economic theory that measures everything by increasing GDP, gross domestic product. If the GDP isn't increasing by 4 or 5%, economists are wringing their hands and stressing. So the question is, how can we keep biggering and biggering forever? As some of you may know, nuclear fusion was performed for the first time sort of successfully, right, where they got more energy out than what they used to put in. But even if you talk, there's like a 10-year delay before that was even technology that could be used. But that is still providing more energy, but we're still using up the ecological gifts that we've started with. So, you know, I think this is a question about balancing science and economy. Do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is the topic of a lot of books that are out there. And, you know, I mentioned that, and I really appreciate this question because it speaks to the complexity of this and the fact that there isn't a a perfect solution out there that ticks all of the boxes. And there's a really insightful book. I mean, I read about one or two books about climate change and biodiversity each month. So I know I'm always recommending a million books, but this was by another environmental journalist, Canadian, Arno Kopecky. The book is called The Environmentalist's Dilemma. And it was perhaps the most coherent book in just sort of making sense of what's in front of us. And one of the big insights from that book was, while we may address the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis is coming right on its heels. You know, we can solve climate change, but still lose significant parts of our biodiversity. We can still choke the ocean with plastic. We can still pollute soils with fertilizer, and on and on and on and on and on. And David Attenborough touched on this in a venue that I think probably got to more people in that recent documentary, A Life on the Planet, or A Life on This Planet, something to that effect. This idea that climate change is one of many gargantuan challenges that we face. And we cannot lose sight of the fact that an economy based strictly on linear one-way growth just doesn't work. And, you know, we bring up the word sustainable and sustainability, which I think in many contexts is associated with environmentalism, and that's appropriate. But what sustainability really means is just to be able to keep doing something. You know, you sustain your energy by eating food and sleeping and getting enough getting enough water. Sustainability is just about being able to keep doing what we're doing. And this system based on linear growth, we can't keep doing. It's been a real party for some people for a certain period of time, but we're already paying the piper in many, many ways for it. And this is where I point to a lot of the great work that's happening related to circular economic models. And here comes another book recommendation. Some of you may have read it, Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth. She also has like a 20-minute TED Talk, which, you know, takes less time than reading the whole book. But it talks a lot about an economic model that is not strictly based on this linear growth. So as I say, really appreciate the question, because this is a critical part of this network of solutions and approaches that are related to climate change, but not exclusively climate change when it comes to our ecological and economic systems and their interplay.
Beautiful. Sam, I've got some questions about the game. So even though I'm sure you could add on to that, I'm gonna flip over to you for some game related questions. How many people can play solutions at once? Could a whole classroom do it together, or?
Yeah, so officially the game is 1 to 8 players. I suggest actually 4 to 6 players per game, just because that gets the maximum engagement per student. I find above 8 per game, you technically you could do an infinite number, but above 8 students per game, students start feeling left out of the conversation, if that makes sense. But I did show a video with that elementary school where that was one teacher playing on a projector in front of the whole class at the same time. So it is possible to do one game for an entire class, but I think for the maximum experience, I'd limit to 8, if not 4 to 6.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I could also say that thank you to Ian for your insightful answer for that question, by the way. It just took me a minute to process. It was still whirring through. And your book recommendations are gold, as always. Okay, so Jessica asks, when in a climate change learning progression would you recommend playing solutions? Is it useful as an introduction? Like, can they learn as they're doing it, or would it be best after they have a bit of background information?
Yeah, I think having background information is great to have. The game is designed to not require too much background information. I think the main things that students need to know is that CO2 is bad, climate change is bad, and maybe that methane is 20 to 80 times worse than CO2, and that there's different greenhouse gases. Aside from that, I tried to keep it very self-contained. That being said, there is a free lesson plan that comes with the game, and the free lesson plan does cover any background information that might be needed. And so if you already have your own background information and your own lesson, I think that's fantastic. And if not, that can be a great way to get into that.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm going to keep going because there's lots of game things, and then I've got some other questions later on. So let's because people are interested when I hash it out. It's pretty awesome. Tanya asks, have you tried it with upper level sort of environmental science university students, people who are very well versed in the concepts and are concerned about it?
Yeah. So we did elementary school, middle school, high school, bachelor's students, master's, PhD. We also played with the original Drawdown research team, and they, funnily enough, actually they played on the hardest difficulty. So there's 3 difficulty modes. They played on the hardest difficulty, and they actually lost the game, even though the game is based on their research. And the reason for that is I implemented a rule to make it fair, where the researchers could not talk about their own areas of expertise. And so the transportation expert could not talk about the transportation solutions, et cetera. And it was just a really interesting wake-up call for them. Like, oh my God, like we know our own fields really well, but we're working in the same organization. We don't know about the rest of them.
That is so interesting. And I feel like, for example, sometimes it's a bit disheartening in politics, for example, where cabinets, the Minister for Education or the Minister for Climate and the Environment, doesn't have a science degree, doesn't have any background knowledge, and they just sort of seem to be put there by their friends. Maybe that's just the UK, but like there's these thoughts. So, if they have this information when they're young, it's going to just filter into them being better decision makers. Okay, there's a couple more. Oh, this is an interesting one. Randy says, are there any challenges that you found that whilst playtesting, given the open-ended discussion, that some players state misconceptions that could become entrenched? Is there some way to challenge that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we have seen in all the playtesting of the 600 plus people, it's always been very, very civil discussion, very open-minded, and it can be a very humbling game in that sense, where even people who feel like they know everything kind of come into it with an open mind. And the great thing is that's what the QR codes are for. So as I showed on the back of the cards, there's a bit of a short explanation, but then the QR codes are there to help people dive more into things as well. And then obviously if you're a teacher, then guidance is always great.
Yeah, you can't have someone saying, but the aliens will save us. Not yet anyway. Maybe they are secretly. Okay, so Alison says, I'm going to pose this to Ian. Alison has a public program with a wide range of audience members, I guess different age demographics, different sort of understandings. Can you recommend some good resources, or like how would you share, and you have great experience doing this, with them, with a wider audience about climate change?
So not just in an educational setting particularly?
Yeah, I feel like public program, I'm imagining some kind of, maybe Alison, you can type in the chat if you're still here, maybe some sort of like parks program, or I'm thinking of something like where you might have youth and adults together. I mean, I think some of the games in teaching teens, for example, could be adapted where adults
I think
certainly...
that one example with the carbon regulation schemes is very easily adaptable to utilities companies in your jurisdiction, and you can make it even more local based to look at how energy is distributed in your town or your city. So that would definitely be a big one. I know also, and I know Tim Swinehart's going to be presenting on this later this winter in the series, the People's Curriculum for the Earth has some really useful activities that can be used in educational settings, but also expanded to the general public. And I know that's also available in the store, and it's also sitting right beside me here. So those are certainly two excellent resources. There's another one, and this, for me, like the best coffee table books about climate solutions are Drawdown, Regeneration, so the 2 Paul Hawken books, and also this new one that came out last year called the Carbon Almanac. And you can go to thecarbonalmanac.org. Marketing expert Seth Godin wrote the foreword for the book, and it was put together by hundreds of volunteers. And it's basically like a one-stop shop for just everything you need to know about climate change, climate solutions, information, disinformation, the science. It's just kind of everything all in one. Plus the website is there for updates. So I will throw that in the chat box as well. It's a really good resource to go along with the educational ones.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, in classic us style, it's now 5:02 where I am. It could be any other number of hours where you are, and as we time travel through time zones. But thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a really quick soft close. I'm going to talk very briefly and do some prizes. There's 4 prizes up for grabs, 2 gift cards to the Outdoor Learning Store and 2 gift cards to the Take Me Outside store, which have amazing ethical apparel. And then perhaps there's just like a couple more questions still. If we stayed behind for just a few minutes, we could answer those if you will bear with me. But Ian, Sam, thank you so much. You know, there are so many people here who are probably incredibly passionate about this and care about it, or maybe don't have the expertise, but both of you have dedicated so much time and energy to communicating this esoteric knowledge that you have, and doing it in a way that inspires and engages, and it's just wonderful. So thank you so much, not only for the resources that you helped to create and share, but for today especially. So thank you. All right, people, there are some other winter workshops coming up. We've got Taking Math Outdoors on Tuesday, Feb 7th. We're talking about environmentalism and race and how to connect into different communities on Tuesday, Feb 21st. We've got a People's Curriculum for the Earth, as Ian mentioned, with Tim Swinehart, Tuesday, Feb 28th. And we're going to finish off with March, ending winter, looking forward to spring with school gardening, teaching tools and resources. You can sign up at outdoorlearningstore.com/workshops. And so the prizes. So if you've ever been to one of these before, I do like to do a quiz. The first 3 are kind of a bit nitty gritty sort of numbers quizzes. I'm going to give you a couple of true or falses. And just some, you have to guess the right number. Steph is watching the chat. It can get a bit wild in there, so bear with us. But this is a typing. First correct answer gets it. So the first 2 questions are for $25 gift cards to the Outdoor Learning Store, of which you could use to access any of these fun resources that you've learned about today. Okay, true or false? Please wait until I finish the entire question before typing. True or false? More than 1/3 of food purchased never makes it to a table. True or false? Lots of people.
Are we accepting the first letter of either true or false?
I think so. Oh no, I'm going to say the full word. I think I'm going to be mean. That took a bit longer to type.
Just barely. So Michelle Adderby, you were first up saying true. The answer is true. More than 1/3 of food never makes it to a table. So message me with your email and whether you prefer Canadian dollars or US dollars for that OLS gift card.
Fantastic. So some of it, food spoils in transit, some consumers throw it out, but food loss and waste account for around 8% of total human-made greenhouse gas emissions. So it's kind of a biggie. Okay, this one's just choose your own answer. Question 2, another gift card to the store. What on earth has the greatest capacity to store and absorb the heat that we generate on our planet? What on earth?
I'm going to look for the exact answer here, and that was Maria Rocha with the ocean.
Correct. Well done. Yeah, a 2019 study found oceans had sucked up 90% of the heat gained by the planet between 1971 and 2010. It absorbed around 26 trillion joules of heat. I don't even know what that number looks like. I can't even comprehend 26 trillion joules of heat. And that was it just in 2020. So it's absolutely incredible. Love the oceans. Thanks for all you do. Okay, 2 more questions for you quickly. These next 2 winners are going to get a gift card to the Take Me Outside store. Really beautiful ethical apparel. Here we go. So I'm going to go with the best, closest number for this. So on average, how many billions of work hours were lost to excessive heat between 2019 and 2021, we might get all kinds of random. So on average, how many billions of work hours were lost to excessive heat? I don't know if that includes people, saying that they were too hot to work and then just going and hanging out, playing pickleball or, scrolling on Facebook. But who knows? So how many billion? If we're not, this is actually quite tricky. Really haven't seen it. Okay. I'm going to tell you it's higher than
sorry.
Ooh, no, go on.
There's someone within 3.
Oh, absolutely. I see it. Is that Callisto?
Yeah.
Yes, Callisto Nanan. Congratulations. Send your details to Steph. So a report from the Lancet found that a number of work hours lost to heat across the globe increased from around 200 billion in 2000 to nearly 300 billion in 2021. So that's the equivalent of 88 work hours per employed person lost to being too hot. Yes, and or sneaking off, I think, possibly, but there we go. Okay, last question. It's a little lighter in topic. And we all have heard about manure being a part of emissions, but how many pounds of manure can a cow produce each day? How many pounds do we think? Oh, this is so hard for you. I'm really sorry, Steph. I've made it very difficult. Normally I have multiple choice. I saw one. If you can get within, I think I see Cheyenne Park might be closest.
I don't think I've scrolled that far yet.
Yeah, I think so. It's 115. So cows poo up to 15 times a day, which can be up to as much as 115 pounds or 21 tons per year. These large quantities can be put to good use though, because manure works well as a fertilizer, a fuel, or can be transferred into biogas to create electricity and heat for developing parts of the world. So solutions exist in all shapes and sizes. So Cheyenne, please send your information. So that's it. That's all for me. I actually do have one really quick thing I want to share before I pass it back for just a couple more questions. And it's this little thing here. So we have, over the last couple of years, been working really hard behind the scenes with some amazing organizations. Again, Indigenous peoples are essential in supporting or having access to the information to support climate change amelioration and adaptation. And so we have this learning opportunity for you. It's virtual from Feb until June. Registration closes on Feb 15th. And then there are monthly speakers, Indigenous speakers, talking to truth and reconciliation, and it's an amazing learning journey. We hope that you might join us. You can check it out at outdoorlearningstore.com/everychildmatters, and it's all about acknowledging the truth of what's happened to Indigenous people. It is focused more around Canada, but it is relevant to anyone in North America. So we hope that we can join that you can join us for that. And so thank you. I've hijacked enough. It is time to go back. If you can stick around for just a couple more questions, there are some really interesting ones in the chat. Thank you so much for listening and for joining us. And if you do have to go, that's wonderful. It's wonderful that you joined us. Okay, back to you, Ian and Sam. Emma said, we're going back to the game, actually, Sam. I love the concept of the game, and this touches on a lot of the work you do as well, Ian. I love the concept of the game. It seems to encourage empowerment. My question is, why do we even bother focusing on the doom and gloom aspect of climate change to begin with? I've noticed from the 5th grade onwards, talking about climate change takes a more negative turn. I personally have attended at least 8 classes or sessions that were 90% tragic and only 2% hopeful. And Emma feels that this is a poor balance of future projection versus ideas for how to make it better. So why is it skewed like this? And does action require a combination of optimism and last minute panic, or could it just be all optimism? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the negativity comes from what our brains are naturally inclined to focus on. We've evolved to focus on immediate danger and danger in general as a survival mechanism. So I think when you look at the media, that's really what they glom onto in order to sell newspapers or stories. And I completely agree. I think even beyond what you're saying, solutions, focusing on solutions rather than the problems, are one of the best paths forward to break down partisan barriers. And so, for example, we played, one of the teachers who tested the game was in somewhere in Texas. I forget exactly where, but before playing, she expressed her kind of concern that the parents might not be too happy with the subject matter, and she was very worried about that kind of thing. And they ended up playing the game. It went fantastic, and I think one of the reasons for that is it's a lot easier to brand climate change as a political issue, but how can you say that planting trees isn't a good solution, or having better farming practices, or wasting less food? It's a lot harder to refute these solutions, and I think solutions can hopefully bring us together a lot better in that way.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that, in Chris Turner's book, How to Be a Climate Optimist, the book that came out last year, he talked about how just our narrative framing about the challenge of decarbonization and building a clean energy economy has to be focused on making things better instead of less bad, which seems kind of whatever, it's just words. But like, I think it is kind of an important difference. If we only focus on what we need to do less bad, like if we only talk about emissions reductions, not that we shouldn't talk about it, because we have to, and that's really important, but what does the clean energy economy look like? And that's this idea of future casting and describing in great vivid detail the we figured it out future. And a clean energy economy isn't just better for the environment or for people who really value ecological systems. It's better in a lot of other ways. I mean, just a very simple, practical way, it's quieter. I mean, I like when things are kind of quieter. That's a really appealing part of the future. So, imagine being able to commute and being able to, do another task while you are commuting. Maybe you can work while you're commuting. Like, those are the kinds of things, like, you look at some of these bullet trains in parts of the world like Japan, and the fact that you can get such incredible distances powered by clean energy, and it's a really comfortable, nice ride. So it's not just decarbonizing, it's like, this is just better totally in general. So yeah, focus on solutions. Not to say that we use that term doom and gloom so much. I mean, it's an alarming situation, so anger and frustration might be part of your journey of processing all of this, but that can't exist without the solutions, especially when the solutions exist and they're there and they're already happening.
Both of you, do the resources, Green Teacher resources, come in French? Does the game come in French for people that live out east? Or are we translating in process?
Yeah, I currently have the French translation in process. It should hopefully be done in a few months, and we'll see. It's actually a volunteer helping with that, and so if anyone wants to help volunteer translate into any language, please reach out to me.
Ian, do you have some French resources at Green Teacher?
Yeah, we're in discussion about translating the 2 climate change books into French, and our French companion site, Prof Vert, has a lot of sustainability and climate change related activities that have been fully translated into French. I'll just throw the link in the chat box here. Yeah, and Español, otra vez.
Wonderful. I think we're nearly there. Just 2 more, but Scuba, you've had your hand up. Would you like to unmute and ask your question verbally? Still muted for now. Don't panic. I can ask another one and then come back to you. Yeah, sorry, you're still muted. I'll come back to you. But Fawn asked, do you have a vocabulary of hope and climate change communication preferred phrases, a lexicon related to what you're doing, in other words?
Not all together in one place, but just in the work that I've done in climate communication, a lot of it sort of comes together, like this idea of making the future better instead of less bad, focusing on climate solutions as opposed to the climate crisis. Not to say that you shouldn't say climate crisis, but it has to be accompanied by climate solutions. And yeah, that Vic has just put in there, Hope Matters by Ellen Kelsey, fairly recent book, another Canadian author, touches on a lot of that. Britt Ray wrote a book, Generation Dread, which is actually not a dread-inducing book necessarily. I mean, there are parts of it that are distressing because it's talking about an alarming situation, but she focuses on a way through. I mean, honestly, like I read so much about climate change and I don't find it a downer. I look forward to new releases of climate change books, like I, look forward to the next, big movie kind of thing, because it is actually incredibly empowering. Even though we're not on track yet, we still can, and things are really happening. You could argue it's an exciting time to be alive.
I like that. Okay, Scuba, I see you managed to come unmuted. Would you like to share?
I couldn't be any more excited. Look, I'm in Australia.
Hello, you're in Tomorrow. She's in Tomorrowland.
I'm in Tomorrowland. Look, the world's still with us. That's an oldie but a goodie.
Fantastic.
Look, I work with, I'm very lucky. I do this very unusual thing. I work with K to 6, kindergarten to year 6, working with environmental education, but I link it to our curriculum, which is the only way I've been able to make it meaningful in our schools. But my biggest issue has been for years about allowing the kids to not worry about things. Can you hold on for 1 second? Okay, Google, stop. Sorry. So our kids, so year 6 kids and things were like during the fires before COVID and during the floods now, giving them a positive outcome. And the only thing I've been able to say to them is, every time they come outside with me and they plant a seed, they're making a difference. But I'm wondering if anyone else has something more you can give to the kids to make them feel, I guess, hopeful.
Yeah. I think the most hopeful thing is action, and it's not telling the students something; it's getting them to actually see that they themselves can be doing something about it. And like Ian says, they have all these amazing activities that are very hands-on, and just how can you, the way I frame it with the board game is, and I didn't really say this in the presentation, but the point is, after you play the game, you can pick your favorite solution and turn it into a real world action, right?
Sounds amazing.
And try and, like Ian was saying, get that action to be about affecting more than just themselves, and how can they affect their entire class, their entire school, their parents, their neighborhood. How do you expand that sphere of influence? Ian, if you have anything to add.
It's hard also because I work at a few different schools, so different socioeconomic groups and different places, and some where everything is softball. Don't know whether you have that over anywhere else, but it's all plastic on the ground and astroturf and that sort of thing, and other areas where it isn't. And the kids with the astroturf and stuff, they're trying to clean up after themselves, but it's really hot, and just trying to tell them it's all going to be okay if they learn from me, just even for one term. Anyway, I find it a bit difficult at the moment.
I can go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, just it's important to acknowledge the difficulty in it. As much as we're really trying to be empowering and focus on solutions, it's okay to, feel your feelings, and it would be strange not to feel frustrated or even angry at times. And I think we touched on that in the podcast, Sam and I, we were kind of parsing everything out. It's life, right? It's everything. It's all emotions.
Excellent.
It's the ups
All
and
right.
downs. Anyway, Sam,
Thank
you were
you.
gonna chime in.
Yeah, I think we did cover this in the podcast. The way I see it,
I'll be listening, Sam. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah. I think the way I see it, climate is truly an exponential and terrifying problem. And it's the worse it gets, the worse it gets, right? The hotter it is, the less plants absorb CO2, the less the ocean absorbs CO2, the less it can absorb heat. And I don't want to not underscore the seriousness. It's an exponential serious problem, but the solutions are also exponential. And I mean that not just in a Moore's Law technology way, although yes, Moore's Law technology way is great, but also there's an exponential quality to the way that we build on previous knowledge, and as we all educate ourselves, we build on that. But then also, I believe social movements are exponential as well. And if you've heard of the 3.5% rule and how things can quickly flip in social movements. And so really the way I frame it is it's kind of a race between the good exponentials and the bad exponential. And we'll see which will win out, and it's up to us to try and tip things in favor of the good exponentials.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. And also, as a random point, some of the things I do, if we've got extreme weather or you've got extreme things happening outside, what about doing some t-shirt bag recycled t-shirt bag making, or doing something with waste-free lunches where you make simple snacks and learn about food and things that they could control within a classroom if you maybe can't go outside. Okay, thank you so much for your question and for sharing. And this is it's a hard place to be, but if you look at the hundreds of people that are here after their work day, after their school day, after everything that's gone on, caring about this, we got some good people going.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and it is 5:23. Last question is, Elizabeth asked, how long does the game take to play, Sam, generally?
So 60 to 90 minutes, but if you flip over the board, then 30 to 45 minutes. So there's the short mode that I designed more for classrooms. Although if you actually want to keep it to 30 or 40, it's also, people play at different paces depending on how deep they're getting into the discussions. And I wouldn't prioritize finishing the game at all costs over fostering those discussions, if that makes sense, because ultimately that's the point. Whether or not they get to the end of the board, let them have the discussions.
And it really does inspire that. Thank you so much, everyone who's participated, to Ian and Sam for sharing your passion and your knowledge. This is an incredibly important and complex subject, and I think you've shared some really valuable things for people to take away. Again, all the resources that we've talked about can be found in the Outdoor Learning Store, some of those book links and things. You can go down to the bottom of your chat and hit the 3 dots there, and you can click Save Chat if you're interested in some of the other links that people were sharing or that conversation. And I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you for joining, and we'll say good night and take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.